I am thrilled to introduce to you all the founder and CEO of BAMwx out of Greenwood, Indiana. If you haven't seen BAM Weather on Facebook or anywhere else, then you've just got your head buried in the sand. Oh, you need your clicker. Sorry, you're fine. It's a group, it's a private meteorologist outfit that started, how many years ago did you start? 12 years ago. They're up to 21, I think he told me, employees working out of there. What's interesting about what they do is they take the time to focus on certain industries as it pertains to the climate forward ahead of them. And obviously that falls into his wheelhouse then as you look at a group full of agricultural producers and start talking about potential growing season outlook. So naturally, I called him and thought if he could come out. I'm a customer. Doug's a customer on the app. If you don't have these guys' app, I'll talk about this later. But if you don't have their app on your phone, and have access to that information, what they're putting out's great. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to him and let him give us a little growing season forecast.
Awesome. Appreciate that, and thanks for having me. Made the drive from Greenwood. I drove through Connorsville, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with the gymnasium, the bowl there. Played basketball there in high school. Probably my favorite gym in the state of Indiana to play in. So really enjoyed going through there, brought back some memories. Anybody local or close to Greensburg? Follow, okay. Coach Stacy Meyer led the Greensburg Knights, I believe, maybe to 2 back-to-back Indiana Pirates. Okay, Pirates to 2 back-to-back state titles. He was my high school basketball coach in Whiteland years back. So Stacy Myers is a basketball genius. But I just love driving through Indiana because I love basketball, and it just kind of reminds me of it as I drive through. This is a little bit about me. Like I said, my name's Michael Clark. I did not wear the same shirt planned, but hey, there it is. Yeah, my wife plans my clothes. You know, she just sets them out and I wear them. I don't know. But I've had an extreme fascination with weather since really about 8 years old. From the south side of Indy, born and raised here in Indianapolis, back home in Indy. Majored in meteorology at Mississippi State University. What I learned there, I use about 6% of it. All right, founded BAM in March of 2012. And now serving as our CEO and co-founder here. We're rapidly growing in multiple industries. In fact, we are growing so quickly right now, it's very, very difficult to manage and scale and learn and figure out how to do it and manage employees. And it's a great problem to have, but you know that's where we're at. My free time, I love to date my wife. I married up. Spending time with my 3 kids here. I've got Delaney, Sutton, and Lucas. Thankfully, the third one was a boy. I was outnumbered. But I love to stay fit and smoke cigars, whitetail deer hunt, and drink bourbon. So that's kind of my free time and what I do. So anybody's got any good bourbon? All at the same time? It depends. Depends on the day, yeah. But a lot of people ask, you know, why did I get into this, and why am I so fascinated with it? And I think it's really because I genuinely love to help people. I genuinely love to assist people in making decisions and helping them, you know, succeed. And a lot of times with what we're providing with folks, it's really helping guys that are able to make really expensive decisions on the fly. You know, whether it's for you guys, whether it's putting seed in the ground or applying a chemical or harvesting or whatever it is that you might be doing, a lot of guys, they'll look at the radar and they'll see that rain's 50 miles away and they want to know if it's going to hit them or not because they've got a decision they need to make. You know, I think back to April in 2017 when basically about every customer we had replanted their crop like 4 times because of all the rain, right? So we try to assist people in making their decisions. You know, I don't stand up here and advertise 100% accuracy because that's not true, but it's just about having an extra tool on the tool belt, and that's what I really love. And what fascinates me is that what has ruined forecasting weather is these cell phones. It's ruined it. It's damaged everyone including myself, because everybody has like 6 different weather apps, and they all suck. They're horrible. And the reason for that is that people, we crave information now, and we want the best information that we can get when it's ready. And what a lot of folks don't know about these free weather apps is they are actually data collection organizations, and they take your information and they sell it back to their marketing companies. They don't produce the weather information in the app for accuracy. They don't care if it's right or wrong. It's not why they're made, right? So that's why every time you look at them, they're different. Those are just facts. There's a huge lawsuit. There was a huge lawsuit between Samsung and AccuWeather, because AccuWeather was taking all that information and taking it from Samsung and providing it to other marketers. It was a $19 million lawsuit. AccuWeather lost. It's a lot of that going on because they take and share your private information. So I'm passionate about that because it really is crap information. It's not good. And what it does is it makes people believe that that's just how it is and that's the only information we have, and it just isn't very good. And that's not true. And so that's why I get so passionate about our business and our organization, all right? So that's a little bit about me, about us, and what we do. What I want to get into now is kind of the nuts and bolts of our outlook. I want to show you how last year's outlook went versus what we said would happen. And then we'll get into our prediction this year, our growing season outlook it's February 1st, so in February. All right, so on the right, these are preliminary outlooks that were sent to our customers, I believe last year sometime in, looks like February. All right, these were sent out in February. The general idea last year was that the central U.S. would deal with a very hot and dry summer. If there was a risk for cooler and wetter weather, it would have been the eastern portion of the growing regions. All right, generally that was okay. We had some spots that were very dry here across central Indiana, western Ohio, relevant to normal, but not nearly as dry as the Central Plains, and not nearly really as dry as they still are right now. There's still a really, really solid drought going on in the Central Plains, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Very, very warm, too, in the central and southern U.S. And so overall, that prediction wasn't too bad. We were too dry in the desert Southwest, and you get the monsoons that fire up, and you never know if they're gonna perform, and they did last summer, okay? But listen, we are in this very rare, in fact, first time not the first time, I apologize, third time since weather data has been kept of a third-year La Nina. So we've been in a La Nina now for the third consecutive year. We have never seen a fourth consecutive year La Nina since weather data has been tracked. So if we slip into that here in the spring and summer, that'll be the first time that's ever happened, okay? And La Nina or El Nino, that's the largest global pattern driver that exists. That water in the equatorial Pacific Ocean drives weather patterns for everybody in the world. It's the most critical part when looking at seasonal weather outlooks, okay? So where we go is very, very important for this year's growing season. And listening to the gentleman before me talk about the price action, between $5 and $8, the weather's going to have a significant impact on that, for sure. So that's about all I know from what that guy said, because I really never understand what they're saying. But I don't do that for a living, so I have no idea what it means anyways. But yeah, I wish I could. But it's fascinating stuff. It really is, and I respect it. It's predicting the future just like we do, and so it's very hard. It's not easy to do, right? But let's look at where we're at. Historical start to 2023 severe weather season. We've had more severe weather reports since January 1st than we ever had in history. It's been a very, very active start to our severe weather season. Tornadoes, hail, wind reports, you name it. We've had large tornadoes go through the city of Atlanta, Georgia, and it's just been active. The indications are that in the spring that this area here will shift a little bit north and west and keep it pretty active in the spring season for severe weather and rainfall. All right, and that's a classic indication of a weakening La Nina. is you have very active spring severe weather seasons. All right, so we anticipate that to continue. This fancy line chart that you see here shows the severe weather reports, the number of them versus the historical average is well above the mean here, or the normal, and well above the other years as well. In fact, the year that it's tracking the closest to is 2012 for the current time being, okay? I know, everybody, I know. Go ahead. I know, I knew, it happens every time. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But drought monitor for 2023 on the left, the latest, versus on the right. Last year's difference, guys, was the drought was a little bit further west to start, and now it's really in the heart of the central U.S. It's about a state east versus where it was. And it's just drier right now in general for some of the primary U.S. growing regions versus last year, all right, especially in Nebraska and Iowa. However, it has been really wet over the last month in those regions. They have seen rain, they've seen snow. So there is some relief there. When we look at the current state of things, the month to date in January, they've had a lot of rainfall from normal. In fact, some of this is 500% of the normal rainfall. Now, you go, wow, that's a lot. Well, in January, it's really not that much. So it's always important to remember the time of year that, if you average 2 inches of water in a month, you've only gotten 5 and you need 20. So there's still just keep that in mind. Now, if it was July and that was happening, then you're looking at, 30 inches of rain. It's a big difference. All right, so perspective or key is always key there. Very, very warm to start January. In fact, the whole month of January was very warm. In fact, it was one of the top 5 warmest Januaries for the country in terms of a heating demand standpoint. If anybody follows the natural gas futures, they're really bad. They're really, really low. There's just not been a big demand for heat this winter. There hasn't been cold. We haven't had any incredibly cold weather, except for Christmas. It was horrible. All right. I think I had my thermostat on 70, and it never got above 60 for like 3 days. And I live in a somewhat newer home, so it's like, well, they didn't do that very well. But here's a look at snowfall, guys, to date. And again, this is season snowfall, so this is December 1st through now. I mean, a little bit more snow than last year. But guys, the last 5 to 6 years, winters have just been north and west of here. We haven't had the classic big major snowstorms and prolonged cold events like we've had in years past. And a big contributor to that is this extended La Nina that we've been in. We've got to buck that. We've got to get that out of here. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But we are going to go on a little bit of a winter hiatus again. This is snowfall the next 10 days. This happened last night, so that's gone. So no more snow really the next 10 days, and it's going to be really warm the next 5 days. We're going to have a nice warming trend. After this morning, it was cold, of course, but we've got a warming trend coming into the weekend. It'll get cold in the 5 to 10, but really the forecast for the first half of February is pretty warm, relevant to normal. And I think that a lot of folks this year might get antsy in February, wanting to get up and going, but I don't think you're going to be able to do that, and I'll talk about that in a second. All right? And I'm not talking to you, Siri. She does that a lot, She comes on. Was that mine? I don't know if that was mine or someone else's. Sorry. Anyways, very, very warm. Okay, 5 to 10 degrees above the average to start out really the first 2 weeks of February. This is the first 2 weeks. Okay. Winter weather, this outlook here, this is our 10 to 20 day out, potential look. It's just more to the north and west. It's below normal activity here in the south and east in terms of snowfall. Okay. A more active pattern in the second to third week of the month can develop, I think, possibly further south and east. And I'll talk about how or why that might be in just a moment. But for the next 2 weeks, it's overall a little bit relatively quieter too. This is rainfall from normal in week 1. So we're running, 1 to 10% of the normal. Virtually means there's no systems to come through. It's a very dry week the next 7 days. And then week 2, we get back to closer to normal. The tan color is just normal. and then the green is slightly above normal precipitation in week 2 across the deep south. All right? Week 1, overall, it'll average out slightly colder than normal, but next week, all that warmth really comes back in pretty quick. We'll have multiple days in the 50s, maybe some days, a couple days in the low 60s. All right, so some early spring-like teasing going on, but don't take that bait just yet. I'm going to tell you why. All right, just a second. I'm going to skip that because I didn't update it. But here's our late February outlook. Okay, this is basically the 14th through the 27th. I see week 3 as still being pretty warm here. There's an indication, I believe it's the next slide and I'll come back. There's an indication that it will get back to pretty cold by week 4. Something I follow very closely is sunspot observations. And the activity in terms of solar flares and sunspots, there's a really, really strong correlation to when it gets really cold in here in the U.S. and when it gets warm. Let's think back to Christmas, okay? Sunspot activity was nearly non-existent. HDDs, which is heating degree demand or heating degree days for the country, was through the roof. So when sunspots are really, really quiet and there's not a lot of solar flares and activity going on, it doesn't really release a lot of heat into the atmosphere, okay? That's the easiest way to describe that. But there's a strong correlation to when the sunspots are low, we get cold. When the sunspots start to increase, we get warmer, so the heating demand shrinks quite a bit, all right? The sunspots are going to really take a jump here the next couple of weeks, which is why we're going to get warm, which is why we have this forecast here for the eastern and central U.S. for warmth. But then you see they start to come back down, not quite as low yet as they were just before Christmas, but they may get down to that point, which is why I think late February, early March, there's another pretty significant shot of Arctic air. Probably one that you're not going to forget. It's probably going to be a pretty significant one. So we base that not only on this research, but also weather models too, and data, and and that kind of thing. And a lot of times I tell people, they kind of laugh at this, but sometimes I have more confidence in my week 3 and 4 outlook than I do my forecast tomorrow. Believe it or not. Because here's why I say that. When someone's asking about the weather for tomorrow, they want to know the weather at a particular address, where they're located. What's my forecast here at my farm, my place of business? Well, that's really, really difficult to do. We do it, but it's very hard. When I can tell everyone the general weather pattern for 5,000 square miles, it's much easier to do because I can say you might be a little warmer than average and it might be wetter than average. But if you want to know the exact amount of rain and the hour-by-hour temperature forecast at your farm, that's a lot tougher, and sometimes confidence is low in that regard. So I like these 16 to 30-day outlooks, right? But again, we're going to start warm in this period, the 14th to the 21st, but I think the 21st to the 27th, we take a lot of this cold air and dump it back in, and then I think we're not done with wintry precipitation yet because it will be an active period for precipitation as well, okay? So we talked about the La Nina. That's an idea of the next 4 weeks, so you guys can take that, grade me on it, let me know how I do. All right, and look here, we're going to look at La Nina. Now just a quick educational piece. La Nina or El Nino is all about the temperature of the water across the equator in the Pacific Ocean. That's all it is, all right? Now, that's a ton of water. There's more water here than we have land in the U.S., but it's whether the water is colder than normal or warmer than normal. If it's colder than normal at the surface, that's La Nina, okay? I don't know who came up with the term La Nina and El Nino because it makes zero sense. If you actually translate it, I think El Nino means like little boy or something in Spanish. So it doesn't make any sense, but those are the terms that they've come up with. The El Nino would mean we just have warmer water here. That's it. Well, notice the water here is very central based. The coldest core of the below normal departures here are central based. That can tell us a lot about our seasonal outlooks. And our February Central Pacific La Ninas tend to favor the eastern U.S. warmth with the cold filtering in the northern plains. AKA the last 3 years. It's really what's been happening. You guys remember we've had snowstorms in April that buried cattle in the northern plains and killed a lot of them, right? So that type of thing's been happening the last couple of years because of this particular weather pattern. So we've got to watch this. This is what we need to see change. There's two very important bodies I want you guys to watch. It's this one right here, and it's the body of water right off the southwest U.S., okay? There's another gentleman who I happen to respect highly and talk to often who is a weather provider. His name's Eric Snodgrass. I don't know if anybody listens to Eric or knows who Eric is. He's very good. I have a lot of respect for him. And he talks a lot about this region as well. This is known as the PMM, fancy term for the Pacific Meridional Mode. But a lot of times the temperature of the water here will dictate whether or not the jet stream is charged enough to have moisture coming into the U.S. When the water is warmer than average, typically the pattern's active. When the water's cold there, typically it's a pre-indication to a drought signal, right? We don't see that right now. I mean, look at California. They just got 300 inches of snow and 30 inches of rain. All right, they squashed the drought there. That's a pre-indicator of the weakening La Nina. Okay, California droughts normally go away when El Niños are starting to possibly come, normally. We already talked about February. So let's talk about that seasonal signal, okay? We've had a La Nina since mid-2020. The last 3-year La Nina was 98, 99, and 2000. That's the last time we did this. All right, so a lot of you guys have been doing this for a long time. Think about those years. Think about what they did for you, right? The first time the third year, which is this year, well, yeah, 2022, so a month ago. The first time that the third year of the 3 years was the strongest of the three is this year, okay? Normally the third year is where we're weakening and it's not as strong. So that's why we're kind of getting into some uncharted territory right now with how that water is behaving. Because, listen, a lot of seasonal weather prediction goes off of statistics and analogs and climatology and things like that. And if something's never happened before, how can anyone tell you what's going to happen? I mean, you really can't. You can give it a good guess, but you can't say for certain this is how this is going to react based on this. Okay, so note here was January of 21. Here we still are January of 23. Still noting a pretty strong look there. Now, this fancy graphic here, I want you to picture this as the ocean. I apologize, I don't know if I'm doing that or what. This is the surface of the ocean in the Pacific at the equator, and this is all the way down 450 meters, down into the deep, deep parts of the ocean. The different colors are warmer than normal water or colder than normal water. So we have this very, very strong, warm pool of water that's festering below the surface in the Pacific Ocean. Well, towards the end of the animation, you can start to see it's trying to make its way to the surface. We get rid of the really deep blues and we start filtering in some of these yellows and oranges. Okay? All it's going to take is one or two what we call Kelvin waves, which are not important for today, that take this and upwell it, bring it to the surface, and all of a sudden El Nino develops pretty quickly. All right? Now, here's the fun part. Last year, this was here, and we thought, all right, we're going to buck this La Nina trend and we're going to get rid of it. And then it didn't. And then we went into another La Nina. All right? So that's why we're in that rare territory of only 2 other episodes of this in our history. It's very, very critical to the growing season forecast. I mean, this is where the growing is going to be determined. So we have to make sure we're watching that closely. I don't know what's going on. Let me make sure this one's off here so we don't. Maybe. I just didn't know if it was that.
Do you see a
Sorry.
correlation between hurricane activity and the coming or the going of the La Nina?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, La Niñas promote higher than normal hurricane activity because typically what happens is the Atlantic water is warmer and the hurricanes fuel off of that warm water. And the Atlantic right now is very warm. So we've seen a big uptick in the last 3 to 4 years of hurricanes versus, if you can recall, we went through like a 10-year period of virtually no hurricanes. So that's a big contributor to that, for sure. So here's our evolution following multi-year La Niñas. Okay, what this is this is how water temperatures behaved as we go through time. Easiest way to describe it. Again, if we're looking at what line are we following the closest, we can't compare to last year because we believe we're going to diverge from last year. Last year kept going. We're going to get out of it. The line we're following the closest to right now is either going to be 99 and 2000 or 11 and 12. Okay? Which would put us in the 2000 category or the 2012 category. All right? So like I said, there's never been a fourth-year La Niña. We've never had one. January data hints at a weak El Nino this summer. It tries to indicate that we go into a weak El Nino. Very, very important that we understand that in January and February, data has what we call seasonal barriers, which means it has a sharp decline in its skill and its ability to predict weather far out because it's trying to figure out where the polar vortex is going to go. You guys know that fancy term, the polar vortex? It's caught a lot of buzz, in the last several years. Well, it's got to go, it has to die off for winter to go away. And the models struggle with when that happens. So it sets up a wall that makes it hard for data to perform by. It gets a lot better in March, okay, because winter's dying down. Just keep that in mind. All right, warm, neutral, weak El Nino summers. So a warm, neutral summer that's not technically an El Nino features really, really good growing seasons. Statistically, there's a lot of evidence that backs very ideal growing conditions in these types of years. Think of 2004, 2009, 2019. In fact, I was involved in a case study in 2004 for the growing season, and I don't think I could find a problem with the crop in 2004, at least when I did the research, right? I'm sure someone could find something. 2009 was a pretty good year too. All right, 2019, I think that we set the new record for yield, right? So these types of setups tend to promote very, very good growing seasons for really just about everyone. Again, the data indicate that we go to that, okay? The fact that we've never seen a fourth-year La Niña would indicate we go to that, right? We can, yeah, so we don't keep blowing people up here. How about that? There we go. Perfect. So the data would indicate we go to that, right? The historical analogs would indicate we go to it. We have to ask ourselves what happens if we don't quite get to this week. So for the record, we're not forecasting an El Nino this summer, by the way. That's not our outlook, all right? We have to ask ourselves, what's going to happen if we don't do that? All right? This slide basically sums up everything I've been talking about. You can read it if you want to. This model set right here did the best last year for where we're at right now. So that particular set of models, it does suggest a warm, neutral ENSO, a very weak El Nino, but it wouldn't be an El Nino. It would just be warmer waters. Okay, that data set suggests that. A lot of the global models, Bureau of Australian Meteorology, Canadians, Europeans, Japanese, France, United States, United Kingdom, they all run weather models for this. Okay, because they're major global economic impactors, right? So a lot of them are indicating this warm, neutral forecast. All right. There's a couple that aren't, though. The Canadians and the Americans, they're a little bit more into the neutral zone. All right?
And that's what we don't want, because we need to tread with caution given the bias that I talked about. There are major, underlined in bold letters, differences in outcomes between warm neutral summers and weak El Nino summers. So if we're just kind of teetering near normal coming out of a La Nina, it's a major indicator for drought and heat. And those summers historically would be, where did they go? Why are they not there? My apologies. I want to go back to this one real quick. Here's the neutral summers these years. We've got 18, 2012, 2006, 2001. So when you think back to those summers and the way they yielded, right, not very good. Now, here's what I want to say, because everywhere I go, I talk to thousands of growers all across the Midwest. I do it for 6 months out of the year. Every time I mention 2012, I always can just feel it, okay? 2012 is an extreme anomaly, extreme. The odds of it happening again are so slim that it's really not worth having the conversation about a 2012 or a 1988, okay? Yeah, they can happen once in every 30 years or so, sure. But the odds of that happening again, they're so slim that it would be foolish for me to say we've got a 2012 coming. That would just be foolish. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, all right? But I am saying the neutral INSO summers, they present problems for the crop. That's what I'm saying. It's warmer and there's less rain, all right? Especially in the heart of some of the major I states, like especially Illinois and Iowa, Nebraska. Not so much here, but certainly further west. So, want to preface that. So here's what I just talked about. In the middle, these are the weak Nino summers, June, July, August. They run cool. They're not very hot. There's a below average number of 90-degree high temperature days. Your nighttime lows, they're getting below 70 degrees. You're just not having temperature issues in these types of summers. And you're also wet for the most part. You're average to above average precipitation in those setups. All right? The neutral ones is where problems arise. All right, you get this heat dome. Think back 2 years ago, major heat dome, derecho through Iowa, 130 mile per hour winds. These thunderstorm clusters ride the periphery of these ridges, and they just flatten everything in their paths because there's such an extreme temperature gradient. In southwest Iowa, it's 110 degrees. In southern Minnesota, it's 60 degrees. So these thunderstorm clusters ride the gradient of that temperature gradient, and they're not good. And so if you get rain in these types of patterns, it's normally from damaging clusters of thunderstorms. MCSs, derechos, those kinds of things. Think back to 2012 around here in the Ohio Valley, June 29th of 2012. A derecho came through, snapped a bunch of foam poles down in Fort Wayne, flattened the crop, right? They got rain, but it damaged their crop. And so you don't want rain from neutral INSOs. It's just not, they're not friendly. So what do we say, right? We've presented to you both outcomes. What are we saying right now? On the left is what we're saying right now. All right? We're saying that I don't think we're going to be in this just neutral INSO territory as of today. I don't think that. I think we're going to be just a little bit warmer. We're going to see that rise. There's a huge pool of warm air underneath the surface there in the Pacific that's available and ready to tap. The solar activity has a big play in INSO, in my opinion. The sunspot activity, it's weird right now. It's fickle. It's low. We need to see an increased amount of sunspot, solar flares and stuff going in on the surface of the sun, because believe it or not, that can enhance our potential of getting warmer in the Pacific Ocean, getting closer to El Nino. That's what we want. I would imagine everyone in here would agree with that, okay, for just better growing conditions. So we're going to keep it wetter in the eastern Corn Belt this year, dry in the central, which is problematic for those folks in the western Corn Belt, all right? Warm too, but really normal conditions here in the east. We average 17, 90-degree days for high temperatures. I would imagine this summer would be close to the average of that. And you'd be surprised at how good, how close we can get to things like that with these types of indicators. All right. It's critical February into March that you're tuning into someone, preferably us, but tuning into someone on a daily basis of these seasonal weather pattern drivers and how it's going to impact the growing season. We update on this quite a bit, but it's just something to watch, guys, because that's going to be the major difference in the growing season this year. And if we had to put, gun to our head type thing, this is what we would say for the current time. All right. So what do we say about spring? And then we'll take questions. Well, overall, March is warm, but April can be cold again. Some of our analogs suggest our historical years that there's mid to late April frost and freeze risks. All right. Coming out of the La Niñas, you get very strong cold fronts, which hence the severe weather outlook that we gave you. Probably a little bit more active than usual. All right. So just keep that in mind that if first week April rolls around and you're feeling real good and you're gonna get your crop in the ground, that's great. Just keep in mind this year that late frost or freeze is a risk. It's not a guarantee. It's just something we're watching that could possibly happen. Okay. As we get closer, obviously we'll know more. But it's February right now. All right. Looking here at the forecast for precip, March is probably pretty wet. If you recall, last year was the slowest planting pace on record, really. Everybody was really, really slow and really late to get into the fields and get stuff planted. I don't think it's going to be the case this year. I think it's going to be closer to the average. I don't see huge delays or issues because then as we move into April, I think the pattern gets drier, which will allow for, obviously, a lot of folks to be up and running in April. So spring in general, above normal temperatures here, and really probably around normal precipitation. If there's a lean, it could be slightly wetter than normal due to the enhanced severe weather risk. A lot of that's going to be just to the south, but we can always have a couple of big overrunning events that bring in a couple of flash flooding days here. We've seen that the last several years. It's not uncommon to see that. Okay. Cold to the north and west, active as well. Probably a slower start up here to the north and west. However, that's pretty typical here as of lately too. Okay. So what I've said today is just let's watch the temperature of the ocean there near the equator, and see where the trends and the behavior takes us, because it'll be the major difference maker for the summer outlook. Pretty confident in the spring outlook right now because La Nina is weakening. There's no question about that right now. So the spring outlook is we're pretty confident on that. We just want to watch summer, okay? Watch that closely for the potential of that to happen. I will tell you the South America outlook, just real quick. I'll do this in like a minute. It was very dry in northern Argentina, southern Brazil a couple weeks ago. The rains have put big dents in that. We've seen rain coming here across South America. All right, where most of our corn production is going on, Qdoba, up through just kind of northeastern portions of Argentina, southwest of Santa Fe. There's a lot of crop right here. They've seen a lot of rain here in the last probably 2 weeks. We anticipate that to continue. It will be a drier week this week, but we think models in the extended here in Argentina are a little bit too dry. As Enzo weakens, La Nina weakens, South America is just going to come into more favorable growing conditions for their crop. Okay, it will stay warm. There's no question. It'll be very warm northern Argentina, but the weather pattern in Brazil, where a lot of the soybeans are, it's pretty much perfect. There's really nothing going on, and it's going to continue to be probably pretty favorable for the soybeans in that area. Okay. So that wraps up my presentation. I've got a couple of screenshots I threw up here of our application that you can get on your iPad or your phone or whatever the case may be. But with that said, I would love to take questions if anybody's got them. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a great question. And basically what he asked was is if the transition from La Nina to El Nino occurs, is that going to affect the second safrinha corn crop in South America? Yes, but in a good way. I mean, well, depends on who's asking, I guess. But weather-wise, it will be favorable weather conditions for that crop. So the problems down there are probably going to start subsiding relatively quickly as La Nina weakens. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. For the most part, I don't know what type of damage has been done to that crop to where we are now. And I know, it's tough to say what the rains and the temperatures are doing to improve it now. But it definitely, the pattern has shifted dramatically, is basically what I'm saying. Yeah, I guess you could have late planting delays, Gotcha. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I wasn't quite understanding you there. I got you now. Yeah, I definitely think this continues to go that direction. Okay. Excessive wetness, probably too much rain can be a problem. If you recall 2015, 16, that, yeah. So that can, then we had a strong El Nino at that time. So something like that could certainly happen. I don't think we're going to get into an El Nino. I don't. I mean, I think we could get close to it, but I don't think we're in a full bore El Nino this year, at least. Oh yeah, you can. Yep, that's not out of the question. So we wouldn't want that here, of course, for sure, but you can do that. Great questions, thank you. Anybody else, guys? I know everyone's hungry. Get you up there and get you that food. But any questions before I wrap it up? Yes, sir. Yeah, so it's a great question. We're talking departures of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius at that surface. The normal is just what the water temperature runs at over a 30-year time period. So if we deviate from that normal, it could be cooler than the 30-year period or warmer by a degree or two. And when you're talking about that much water, that much coverage, it has a significant impact on the atmosphere. So, great question. Well, I hope not much. I hope it's not huge changes, but you never know. It's really tough to determine where that goes. I mean, listen, here's the thing. Because if we look at this, if we look at where we're at right here, if this body of water can't come up to the surface, then we're going to have a problem. And we're going to be dealing with this outcome at least more favorable to this than we would be to this outcome. And that's the big question. I mean, I can't tell you for certain if this water is going to make its way up to the surface. You can see in the recent trends that it's trying to. I mean, you can't argue that trend. But, I hope I don't change it tomorrow. That would be bad. Yeah. Yes, sir. So I mentioned that fancy term Kelvin wave. So that would be like, let's say there's a major Western Pacific hurricane or a big rain or snow event, rain or storm event in the Western Pacific. What happens is you get what we call upwelling. It agitates those waters and brings that warm water to the surface. So that's what would speed that up or exacerbate that risk for that to happen. Mostly it's the Japan Meteorological Association, the JMA. It's the Japanese that collect that. So they do a great job, and they've got a lot of really neat technology to do it, but we kind of rely on their buoys and their observations to grab that. So it's a legit question. I mean, the question is, are we going to change it? Traditionally, guys, no, we're not just going to change this. But again, we are in this territory of uncharted behavior a little bit in terms of where this can go. So it's one of these years where watching it is the trend of it, and the behavior is the best thing we can do for the time being. Yeah. The rules of La Nina would still apply for sure, because what La Nina acts to do is, because the temperature of the oceans are cooler, the jet streams are weaker. We don't have big water supplies. So the general impact should stay the same, where we just have less moisture. So that's a great question. Great questions, guys. Appreciate the questions there. Anything else? Yes, sir. I was waiting on it. So my opinion on global warming is you could have me and 5 other meteorologists, scientists up here that all are going to have different answers. Here's my opinion on it. I've watched it for 15 years. I think I think global warming was a climate scam, and people got rich off of it. B, I think that weather is cyclical, and I think it goes in 20-ish, 30-year patterns. Ocean temperatures change in different ways over different times, and we kind of see things come and go. Now, it is foolish. It is foolish to go, LOL, it's -20, where's global warming? Can't say that, because in other parts of the world, it's not -20. It's very, very warm. So climate change is real. The climate is changing. But is it just going in other areas that we've seen in the past? Well, the planet's almost 5 billion years old. We have data for 200 years. So there's really no way, in my opinion, or any argument that I would believe from someone that would be able to tell me, 2.46 billion years ago that we didn't have this going on. You know what I mean? So I guess my answer is I don't believe in it, and I think the weather patterns are cyclical. So. Yeah, I wish I could. They probably know better than we do. I tell you who the white-tailed deer know real well. I can tell you that. They tell us weather patterns real good. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't. I think it's BS. Here. Sorry, I may get canceled when I leave. I don't know. I'm just no, but yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. No, the carbons they do deplete or eat away at the ozone layer of the atmosphere, and the ozone layer is in trouble, and there are holes in it. And there are a dramatic increase in skin cancer cases due to the sun busting through that ozone layer and impacting that. In my opinion, minimizing that can help with the deterioration of the ozone layer. I don't really know how you're going to do that. I mean, I don't really believe that you really can. We burn so much of it everywhere. You know what I mean? I really don't know how we could do that. You know, if you think back and this is kind of crazy, when you think back to when Fidel Castro was in Cuba and hurricanes were coming, the guy was trying to launch, nitrogen bombs and different explosives into hurricanes to redirect them towards the U.S. Right? That he was literally trying to do that. It's a fact. And what people don't know about a Category 3 hurricane is if you could take the energy from one Category 3 hurricane and you could trap it, it has enough energy to power the entire Earth for a whole year. All of the planet Earth. The energy budget from a hurricane is out of this world. Like you can't even fathom. So altering weather patterns and all that stuff is just really hogwash. You're not going to do it. It's been attempted. They do the cloud seeding in the Dakotas. They still get major hailstorms every year. It just is, I just don't buy it. You know what I mean? So, one more question and I'll wrap it up. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep. That's one of my favorite questions. Thank you for that. Here's how I believe honesty and transparency, accountability. Someone that says, "I told you this was going to happen and I was wrong. Here's why." And that's literally, if you want to work for me at my organization and my employees, there's accountability of you better tell these guys why you said this was going to happen and it didn't. And it's kind of an educational opportunity. And the people that are acknowledging that they're wrong and they're being honest in their delivery, I think that's the difference in a good and bad meteorologist, good and bad politician, or a good and bad person, personally. And I think it's the ability to just have that transparency that you just don't get in this field a lot. You know, that's how I think you can tell, I guess. So. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we do have years that are neutral. Like there's nothing. Like 2012 is like a year where there wasn't anything. So there, for the most part, yes, but there, 30% of the time you could say there's not something going on, and we don't want those. So, awesome, guys. Well, hey, I really appreciate you guys, your interaction and having me out today. And if any of you are interested in what we have, I'm sure they can come to you guys and ask questions. But thank you, and hope you have a great day.